Make it stick. When you started school, university, or any other kind of course, did anyone teach you how to study? Even if the answer is yes, how likely is it that the teachings had any kind of scientific basis? Knowing how to study is a topic which went from one extreme to the other. Some time ago, no one spoke about study techniques. Students simply went to school or university and had to adapt themselves, learning each day what was the best study method depending on the subject, the exam, or the teaching style. Later on, an infinite amount of materials on the internet began to emerge, thousands of articles and videos wanting to demonstrate how you can learn to learn. Some modes of study are truly efficient. However, there are a lot of ideas which are not effective and many myths surrounding the brain. If you have done the Intelligence Arata Academy training and you completed the module on neuroscience, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. And this is why I'd like to introduce a summary of meta-learning to you, which contains the study techniques that have a real scientific basis. The presentation of these techniques will be simple for you to understand and to put into practice. This is what Peter Brown, Henry Roediger, and Mark McDaniel did in their excellent book, Make It Stick: The Science of Successful Learning. In little more than 200 pages, they were capable of explaining in great detail, using practical examples, the most effective study techniques. For every single technique taught, there are various scientific studies showing how and why they work. In the Arata Academy Summary today, you're going to get to know what are these techniques and how you can start to apply them into your studies right now in order to learn quicker and better. It does not matter whether you are a school student at university or simply want to learn new things to advance further in your career. If you want to be an excellent student or professional, only one thing will help you: mastering your ability to learn more and better. Learning is misunderstood. The responsibility for learning belongs to the student as much as it belongs to the teacher. Is it enough for a teacher to be excellent for any student to be able to learn? Making learning easy, simple, and even fun has been an increasingly popular idea, but one that leads people to look for hacks or shortcuts that rarely work. I am sorry to say that learning anything that is worthwhile is almost never going to be easy, simple, and fun. The most successful students are those who actively manage their own learning, which involves hard work, discipline, and persistence. It does not matter how difficult the material is or how good the teacher is. You can learn anything, provided that you make the decision to learn, you put aside time to study, you use the best techniques, and discipline yourself to continue with your studies until you have learned what you wanted. Even when using scientifically proven study techniques, you've got to understand that significant learning is almost always a difficult path. If something is very easy, simple, and fun to learn, maybe the topic has little value. On the professional side, learning something easy is not going to make you stand out. This is obvious, as whatever is easy will probably be learned by all the other professionals in your area. For example, there are people who put on their CV that they know how to use a text editor, they know how to use PowerPoint, but these programs are so easy to learn how to use that it is impossible to tell ourselves that it is something that will make a difference. So bear in mind that in order to acquire significant knowledge and skills, you are going to have to put in the effort. You're going to face obstacles. But the obstacles are not signs of weakness, but signs of strength. Learning that takes effort changes your brain, forming neural connections, building mental models, increasing competence. With this, your intelligence level increases. You begin to realize that the possibility of increasing your intellectual abilities is in your control. And with this clarity, it is worth facing all the difficulties that arise in the learning process. So the first step to learning more and better is to have the best understanding of learning. Do not expect it to be simple, easy, and fun. Everything that is worth learning will bring some difficulties, and you should see this as a challenge that will take you to the next level. To overcome this challenge in the most efficient way possible, there are 3 fundamental study strategies which have been scientifically proven: active retrieval, spaced repetition, and interleaving. Let's look at each one of them. Active retrieval should be your main study strategy in order to learn more and better make a habit of retrieving information. Most students use ineffective study techniques like rereading, highlighting texts, or summarizing information. These are popular techniques for one simple reason: they are easy to do. Everyone intuitively knows how to reread a text, how to highlight passages, how to summarize. Because these techniques are so easy to do, they are also not very efficient. Since your brain does not have to work very hard when rereading, highlighting, or summarizing, you're not actively involved in the learning. Without active involvement, you cannot learn as much as you would otherwise be able to do. And this is why the most effective techniques are those which demand active participation, so that your brain remains active when studying. It is also why your main study strategy should be active information retrieval. And in order to practice active retrieval, you should continuously be testing yourself, doing tests, exercising, practicing what you have learned. Whenever you're reading a text, revising notes, or watching a class, take short breaks now and then. And without looking at the material, start to ask yourself questions, such as, what are the main ideas of this material? Which defined terms, which ideas are new to me? How would I explain these ideas using my own words? How do these ideas relate to the ideas that I already know? Some textbooks include questions at the end of each chapter, and you can take advantage of these questions to retrieve the information. If you are studying for a specific exam, well, you could also look for exams from previous years to test your knowledge. But even if you do not have prepared questions and tests to use, you can create your own questions and note down your answers using flashcards to practice active retrieval. Use questions and exercises to identify which parts you find the most difficult and concentrate your studies on these specific topics. The more difficult it is for you to be reciting from memory the things that you have learned, the more beneficial active retrieval will be for you. Science shows us that active retrieval works better because it helps us to focus on the most demanding concepts in practice, rather than waste time on secondary ideas. Tests also provide a reliable measure of what you have learned well and what weaknesses need to have some further study. If you watched our video about the forgetting curve, you will also know that active retrieval can interrupt the forgetting process. Forgetting is a basic function of a healthy brain. That is why you should make an effort to avoid naturally forgetting. To do this, carry out the practice of actively retrieving information that you have studied. This creates stronger memories and helps you to remember information for the future. Aim to spread out the information retrieval practice. It is better to study a little over a long period of time than studying a lot just in the evening before a test. Spaced repetition means studying the information more than once. However, following a certain timescale, leaving an interval between each study session. For example, imagine that you just began to study a new subject about biology. Since you're starting to learn this subject, you're going to have to study it again in a short amount of time to do an active retrieval and not forget what you learned. But after that, for the third revision, the amount of time should be a little bit longer. The time between each study session can increase as you go on. That is why you must create a study planner which allows for time between study sessions. The time must vary depending on the difficulty of what you're studying. If you're getting the tests right when you're practicing your active recovery, well, the time can be extended. Now, if you're making mistakes, a lot of mistakes, that range should be smaller. There are spaced repetition programs and software which can help you to do this calculation for you. Students of the Intelligence Arata Academy course, for example, have access to a flashcards tool which calculates the ideal interval with this spaced repetition. Another way of spacing out the active retrieval of information is alternating between two or more subjects. And by doing this, you force yourself to continuously refresh your memory about each subject. Whatever the technique, the most important thing is that you space out your study sessions over a long period of time so you don't forget what you studied. It is much better to study a little every day than to study a lot of content just one night before the test. Intense revision on the evening before may seem more productive, but it is not. The belief that you can remember something through pure repetition is wrong. Practicing a lot really works, but only if the practice is spaced out. At first, doing spaced repetitions seems more difficult as it is harder to remember the content. That is, as if you cannot recall the information from the tip of your tongue. But as you rebuild what you've learned, you strengthen your grip on the subject as well as your long-term memory. And when you combine active retrieval with spaced repetition, the effort of pulling information from memory and reconstructing learning brings clarity about what information is most important and makes it easier to remember. Alternate the study of different subjects. Remember that resting is a change of activity. One of the biggest complaints from students is about the fatigue caused by long hours of study. Few are the students who manage to stay focused studying for a long time. Most people need to rest. But what is rest? The human brain never shuts down, so you cannot really rest your brain. What you call resting is simply changing your activity. You stop studying for a while and then you do something else, like watching a movie or surfing on the internet or taking a walk. However, it is possible to rest and continue studying. All you need to do is to alternate the study of different subjects, taking a break from one subject while you're studying another. For example, if you're trying to learn math formulas, you can study more than one type of formula at a time to switch between different problems that require different solutions. Or if you are in high school or college and you have several subjects to study, move on to a very different subject every hour block of study. For example, going from math to biology, and then from biology to history. Most textbooks are structured in chapters that try to exhaust one subject before moving to the other. So studying entire blocks of content at once is not very attractive, so you should alternate between other subjects in the same topic or with other topics. Therefore, when you're making a study schedule, try to interleave between different subjects for each study session. And you will notice that when you're tired of a subject, just switching to something quite different becomes a break. And it gives you more energy to continue studying. Don't wait until you have 100% mastered one subject before moving on to the next. It is more efficient for you to switch subjects. Diversifying the types of issues and content improves your ability to differentiate one from the other, as well as to identify patterns between different subjects. Face the difficulties. Exploring different study techniques when learning is not advancing. Science shows that active retrieval, spaced repetition, and interleaving, the alternative practice, are the three most effective study strategies. But that is not to say that they are the only ones that exist. In any study session, you will face difficulties. Even using the most efficient techniques, still, do not believe in the illusion that your brain will easily absorb everything it sees and that you have a super learning experience with very little effort. If you are trying to learn a subject and it is not flowing well even using all these techniques, you can try others, such as elaboration, reflection, generation, calibration, and the use of mnemonics. Let's now take a look at each one of them in more detail. Add meaning to new content studied using elaboration. Elaboration is the process of finding additional layers of meaning in each new content. For example, you can relate the new content that you're learning to content that you already know. You can explain this new content as if you were teaching a 5-year-old child using the Feynman technique. Or you can explain how this content you're learning relates to other routine activities in your life. That is elaboration in more detail. One way to practice generation is to create a metaphor or visual image for the content that you're learning. For example, a physics student could understand a certain phenomenon by associating that theory to a real situation. So the use of elaboration would be to give the example of, for example, thermodynamics by thinking about how the hands get warm around a cup of hot chocolate. Good teachers often use generation to make things more clear. A well-known example is, for example, when a teacher goes to walk about the structure of an atom and makes an analogy with the solar system, with the sun being the nucleus and the electrons rotating around it as if they were the planets. Today we know, of course, that this is not how subatomic particles organize themselves, but this simplified model has a very important pedagogical function. The more you can elaborate on how new learning relates to what you already know, the stronger your understanding will be, and the more connections your brain will have to remember what you learned today in the future. Review what you have recently studied using the reflection technique. Reflection, on the other hand, is the combination of elaboration and active retrieval. In reflection, you begin a study session by reviewing what was learned in the previous session. You can make it a habit to do one reflection a week. It will be time for you to reflect, writing a short paragraph in which you assess how well you learned. And as you reflect, you can ask yourself questions and answer them yourself. And based on this reflection, you can outline strategies to keep improving in your studies. Some example questions to ponder would be: what was good about my studies this week? What could have been better? What analogies can I make with other knowledge, other experiences? What other things do I need to learn in order to improve my mastery of this subject? Make your mind more receptive to new learnings with the generation technique. Generation is a learning technique that prepares your mind to be more receptive to new knowledge. For that, you need to try to answer questions about the subject that you're learning, even before you study the subject or before you see a class. For example, imagine that you're going to study the digestive system at school. Before starting the class, the teacher distributes a text with some blank spaces for you to be trying to fill in the missing words. In this case, you are generating the word yourself instead of receiving the word already in the text. This results in better learning than if you had simply received the full text. The idea of generation is to actively force your brain to generate knowledge. Even without knowing the subject itself, your brain tries to look for connections in other knowledge areas that you already have to try to generate the answers to the questions that have not been asked yet. Before seeing a class or reading a text, you can practice generating by trying to explain to yourself the key ideas that you hope to find in that new content and trying to imagine how they relate to the knowledge that you already have. Then watch the lesson or read the text to see where you were right. And as you put in initial effort, you also find it easier to get the gist of the new content, even if it is different from what you expect. The best way to use this generation technique is to practice learning by doing. Learning through experience is a form of generation. You decide to do a task, you find a problem, and then you use creativity and knowledge to try to generate the knowledge that solves your problem. If you cannot do that, then you will find the answer in theory, in the text, or doing some internet search. When you do this, your mind is already more receptive to learning new knowledge. Therefore, it is much more likely that you will learn better and remember the solution through practice than if someone taught you beforehand. Calibrate what you already know and what you don't know to get rid of cognitive illusions. Calibration is the act of aligning the clarity you already have about what you already know and what you don't know about a subject. This clarity should come from objective feedback, so that you're not fooled into a false sense that you already know that content, when in fact you have not mastered that content yet. This false sense of knowing something that you don't really know is called cognitive illusion. This cognitive delusion is very common when you do poorly on a test which you thought you did good on. Calibration brings you closer to reality, and to calibrate you just have to test yourself. Testing is the only objective way to eliminate cognitive illusions. By testing yourself, you will have more clarity about your current level of knowledge. For example, if you're going to take a maths test, just look for a test that was previously taken on the same subject. Simulate doing this test without being able to consult your notes, as if you were actually there on the exam day, and then you see what grade you would get. Treat these mock tests as if they were real tests, checking your answers and focusing your efforts on studying topics where your knowledge is still weak. Memorize essential information using mnemonics. Cramming is often seen as a minor kind of learning, but in fact, in many situations, you really have to memorize information to really master a subject. An excellent technique for memorizing information is using mnemonics. Mnemonic formulas are like filing cabinets in our minds. They are not tools for learning per se, but rather for creating mental structures that make it easier for you to retrieve what you have learned. So, mnemonics provide a shortcut for you to memorize information and use it whenever necessary. The most popular form of mnemonic is to form words or phrases to remember something. For example, you could use the phrase, Richard of York gave battle in vain. Then you can memorize the colors of the rainbow: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet. And you can use mnemonics, making rhymes, creating songs, or even associating the information that you want to memorize to a place you know well, as we explained in the video about the memory palace. Or, even better yet, if you have access to the Intelligence Arata Academy training, you can use the memory multiverse, which is the most powerful technique of all. Your brain is plastic. You can increase your intelligence by studying the right way. The functional brain of anyone, at any age, is capable of learning, of evolving over time. This means that you can increase your skills and improve your intelligence even if you consider yourself too dumb, too old, or too lazy. All you need to do is to use the right techniques and keep studying consistently. This evolution is possible because our brain adapts to the stimuli it receives, as if it were melted plastic that molds itself to the container in which it is placed. If you spend all day long surfing social media or passively watching television, well, your brain adapts to it. But if you actively use your brain to retrieve information, to solve problems and acquire new knowledge, it also adapts to that and evolves and becomes more intelligent. Your intelligence is a product of both your genes and the use you make of your brain. No matter what your situation is today, the concept of neuroplasticity proves that you can evolve. You can be better today than you were yesterday, as long as you have a growth mindset and you use your brain to study, to experiment, and to solve problems. Learning changes the brain, building new connections, new capabilities. Our intellectual capacities are not fixed at birth, but they're largely shaped by our effort. What you do shapes who you become and what you're capable of doing. The more we do, the more we are able to do. So to be a student capable of learning anything, you need to have self-discipline, determination, and persistence using the most effective study techniques. The techniques you learned here. Now, the persistence to use the techniques is up to you. The book Make It Stick explains in an easy-to-understand language the very latest in the science of successful learning. The key points you should take from this book are that your brain is plastic. It is moldable to adapt and to develop, according to the effort that you make to have a good learning experience. That is, it is possible to increase your intelligence levels using study techniques such as active recovery, spaced repetition, and interleaving, as long as you have self-discipline. And for those of you who want an exact step-by-step guide with interactive activities so that we can do all of this together, I invite you now to know the Intelligence Arata Academy course by accessing the address arata.se/intelligence.